In the state of Florida, real estate fraud has become rampant. On today's video, we're going to learn about some of the scams and frauds that people are using to leave other people homeless and literally steal their houses from them. Many people feel that real estate investing is one of the most secure ways to move your money, but many people are finding out that it's actually one of the biggest traps that's out there. Many of us would consider the home, the place where you live, as an almost sacred asset. But for some, they're having their homes literally stolen from them. A few years ago, me and my wife were looking to buy this condo right here in North Fort Myers. The bones were good. It was a nice condo. For $100,000 cash that we had, we thought it was a steal. But it turns out that there were some encumbrances about this property that were a definite deal breaker. We thought the low price simply represented the fact that it was in North Fort Myers, a pretty crappy neighborhood, but it turns out that that really wasn't the problem. It turns out that two lawyers had bought units and started to sue each other back and forth. In the case of an HOA, anytime there's any type of legal situation in the community, it is the HOA fund that has to pay for it. Eventually, they kept suing each other back and forth so much that they drained the resources of the HOA, and the HOA started to hand out assessments to the homeowners to pay for the legal fees that these two lawyers inquired by suing each other back to back. It eventually led to people starting to sell their apartments because they couldn't keep up with the assessments. As people started to place their properties for sale to avoid all of the assessments due to the legal fees that they were inquiring, they started to buy up the properties. Eventually, they got to own over 40 to 60% of the units that were available in these apartments. At that point, banks were no longer willing to finance to anyone wanting to buy those units, because when one particular entity or two entities own so much percentage of a building, the banks find it that they don't have any control or ability in what happens in the community. They no longer finance. When a property is no longer financeable, then the banks are not willing to loan money, which means that any buyer has to be a cash buyer, and cash buyers usually don't have the same power of acquisition as people financing. After all, the overwhelming majority of people who are buying an affordable condo are going to be financing it, not buying it cash. So at this point, the people that were left behind were actually in an even deeper hole than those who bailed out initially, having to sell their properties for almost nothing to avoid having their money sucked away by endless legal battles. And this was a never-ending legal battle. Every time they went to court, they would just keep pushing it further ahead, more and more complications, and each time the HOA fund had to cover it, and they had completely depleted the HOA funds to the point where every time they went to court, the community would get an assessment to pay for those legal fees, which eventually they were able to practically steal these properties by creating a legal encumbrance for the residents. This is just one of the many ways in which people are stealing properties here in Florida. On today's video, there just isn't enough time to tell you about all the scam, frauds, and finesses that are out there to leave people homeless in the state of Florida. The list is just endless. Where there's a way to steal, defraud, and leave somebody homeless to take what they got, lawyers, realtors, city officials, anybody who's got money and a little bit of legal creativity can devise a way to take somebody's property from them. This has been an ongoing problem in Florida, and like I said, there wouldn't be enough time on today's video to elaborate on all the different methods that people are using to steal other people's property. While living in Alabama, we had a situation where somebody bought our property and created physical encumbrances to try to do the same thing to us, forcing us to sell for less. Luckily, we held out and we kept our homeowners insurance up to date, because the second part of that scam that takes place in Alabama has to do with waiting for you to take off your homeowners insurance, and then they burn your house down and sue you for the land. That was the route that these people were trying to go through against us in the state of Alabama. We've actually interviewed people on our channel who they went through and did the entire scam to them, leaving them homeless and indebted. So whether you're a buyer, a seller, or just somebody residing in a home, there's always the potential that somebody could plot to take you out of your property and steal whatever rights you have to that property. So in today's video, we won't be able to cover all of these things that are out there, but we're going to learn a little bit about some of the dangers that are out there in the state of Florida and how city officials, as well as other people investing, are going out there and leaving people homeless in Florida to take their homes. A lot of people in Florida are angry at how developers are able to steal people's properties, literally leaving people homeless, but we know they're not able to do this alone. Without the help of their officials in public offices, these developers will not be able to deprive people of their residences. So in today's video, we're going to learn exactly how many of these builders, developers, realtors, with the help of lawyers and public officials, are leaving a lot of people homeless in Florida with nowhere to go while they continue to build their empire of real estate on the backs of those who one day considered retiring in Florida, not knowing that what they had would be stripped from them to make room for the ultra wealthy who now possess the state. And remember that none of this is possible without the assistance of people in local offices who receive massive kickbacks for their efforts. There's a new type of homelessness in Florida, and it's the elderly who have had their homes taken away from them by greedy builders and developers. Overwhelmingly, when we think about homelessness in the state of Florida, we would think that the vast majority of these people are nothing more than junkies and addicts who end up there by their own personal choice. But we're starting to see a new wave of homeless people in Florida. People who are elderly and end up in this situation thanks to crooked officials who on the surface like to portray themselves as people for the people, but in reality are the reason why there are so many elderly homeless on the streets of Florida. And while they portray themselves as heroes for the community in front of cameras, in reality, in the background, they are covertly implicit of depriving people of a place to live by taking kickbacks from developers and enabling them to dispose of the poor people's only possessions to make room for their grandiose developments. The same individuals who these elderly, newly found homeless people voted into power are out there playing golf with the developers who deprive them of their homes. Yet the people in Florida continue to be blind to the reality that the overwhelming majority of officials are doing the bidding of builders and developers, receiving massive amounts of kickbacks, and in the process leaving the same voter base homeless. These politicians have figured out that as long as they tell their constituents what they want to hear, they can go ahead and do something completely different. For some people, it's racism and hate. For other people, it's immigration. The state of Florida has become a bathhouse of George Wallace politicians who simply tell people what they want to hear to get elected, but as soon as they have power, go on to corrupt, gutting the same naive people who voted for them to feed their savage hogs, the builders and developers who are swallowing up everybody's possessions. And don't think these are great places to live. These new apartment complexes built on the remains of these mobile home parks usually go on to have some of the worst reviews possible. Don't think someone that uses deceptive methods to obtain the land is going to create a great community for the new tenants. In the state of Florida, lawyers, developers, realtors, and other people in power continue to facilitate a land grab that is taking away the properties from its poorest residents and putting it right in the laps of big development. Along the coast of Florida, many mobile home parks existed, remnants of an age when affordable housing in Florida was a notion. But today, these affordable housing areas sit right in the heart of the larger metropolitan areas, and builders and developers want to take this land away. So what opportunities has the state of Florida seized to steal the property from the poor? Today we're going to review many of the methods that are being used to take away people's homes and properties, rezoning affordable housing areas, into new categories that the average person retiring in the state could never afford. Many people who retired in the state of Florida many years ago are sitting at home wondering right now how long it will be before they become homeless. When they want to rezone a piece of land so they can move off the trailers and put in some other type of development, in the case of Miami, Florida, the Sweetwater Mobile Home Park, they only offered people $14,000. But if it's FEMA involved and they're trying to condemn your home, then the value of the land is not considered, only the value of the mobile home, when the intention is to condemn the property. So the ruler for measuring the value of a mobile home varies greatly. When it's land that you're renting and you don't own, they want to say that your mobile home is worth practically nothing, so they can be able to rezone it and make you leave your property while paying you only a minimal amount of money. But on the other hand, when they're dealing with FEMA's 50% law, then they completely ignore the value of the land and want to say that the value is in the structure, because then they want to condemn your property. So we can see that the rulers for measuring the value of a mobile home can vary greatly depending on what the intention is. But the result is the same. Mobile homes are being taken away from people who don't want to leave their properties to be rezoned for other types of developments. This is the Florida land grab, where it doesn't really matter what the method is. If you live in an older, decrepit mobile home, they're coming for you. Who lives in these older, decrepit mobile homes? The people who cannot afford a brand new house. We're talking disabled people, people on a limited SSI income, Hispanic families with children. There's also the incentive of the tax base, that if they're able to get rid of these affordable housing areas and build new developments, then the tax base is larger, an incentive allegedly for some of these cities to get rid of the mobile home parks and other affordable housing areas, the only option that elderly people who are retiring in Florida have. The state of Florida is a state that has no state income tax, and really it looks at these areas as undesirable burdens to their system. It seems like in the state of Florida, every single day, the poor people have less and less options on where they can go. And many of the mobile home parks where the elderly have to live today have become rundown, crime-ridden areas, meaning that the disabled elderly have to live in some of the most dangerous neighborhoods that the vast majority of us would prefer not to even venture into. The state's elderly retired people are now being victimized by the communities they live in. As every day affordable housing is less available, the few places that exist become completely unlivable crap holes. And this is the only option that some people who are disabled and elderly in Florida are finding themselves in a situation where the people that are from here are being priced out and forced out. When hurricanes finally come around and destroy everything, the people that own the land underneath the trailer are always eager to condemn these properties so they can rezone these areas into other types of land use that are more profitable. And most people that have a mobile home on land that isn't theirs, they understand that they don't own the land. The issue becomes that individuals become corrupted and try to distort the law in order to evict the people with a process that is illegitimate. Corruption, fiscal delinquency, academic misconduct, perverting public officials to enact their material desires, viciously taking away people's place of residence, using unscrupulous business practices to defile the people and strip them away from the only possession they have, a place to live. Many times these being people of advanced age with limited incomes. Then we have Bradenton Beach, Florida. In the aftermath of Hurricane Helene and Milton, we saw the mobile home parks on Bradenton Beach, right on the island. This is a historic mobile home park that developers, builders, and even the city themselves want to get a hold of this piece of land because it's on the actual island. It's a very valuable piece of real estate, but living there are people who have mobile homes. A lot of these mobile homes are from the eras gone past, even as far back as the 60s. Whether it was for redevelopment purposes or for the city itself, they were eager to have FEMA come in and condemn these properties so that they could finally do the land grab. Now, in the case of Bradenton Beach, it wasn't clear if it was for development or for the city itself. The point being that there are mobile homes on an island near the beach, and either the city or developers have had their eyes on this piece of land for a while. So as soon as the hurricane came through, they wanted to come in and immediately condemn all these mobile homes in order for them to do a land grab. What was interesting, however, is that throughout the entirety of Manatee, Charlotte, and Sarasota counties, there are mobile home parks that were completely annihilated, and FEMA never stepped foot in any of those places to condemn those properties because it is an attractive real estate. In other words, it is clear to see the intention of FEMA going to these particular mobile home parks first and making a big scene there is because somebody wanted that land. The reason why, very clear. It's directly on an island. However, none of that fuss or mess happened in the poor communities further inland. So we saw in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene and Milton how many people were eager to try to snatch up these pieces of property, mobile homes on the island, suggesting that they were unfit for the aftermath of a hurricane, even though if you went into that mobile home park and looked at it yourself, damages were actually quite minimal. FEMA, with the assistance of local officials, were trying to tell people in Bradenton Beach that their structures were now condemned. However, there's a statute in the state of Florida that any building, especially mobile homes built before the building code in 1968, did not have to comply with the new building regulations. So by FEMA stepping in saying that these mobile homes were not up to the current building codes is actually a violation of this particular state statute. So even though there are rules on the book that clearly say that any mobile home built before 1968 does not have to comply with any type of new requirements, this is exactly what FEMA tried to convince many homeowners of in order to get them to sign papers saying that their homes were condemned, because after all, their intentions were to do a land grab, take away these people's properties on Bradenton Beach. It seems like at this point the situation might have got resolved. I don't know what exactly happened or what the final conclusion was in Bradenton Beach, but one thing was clear. The intention was to deprive these people of their homes, even though they are legally entitled to it. That doesn't stop public officials from trying to enact land grabs to benefit either their own city or builders and developers. We've seen itself repeated throughout the entirety of the state of Florida in many different places. Bradenton is now under threat. We know what their intentions are. The city of Bradenton, Florida has more mobile homes than anywhere in the state per capita. Bradenton's landmass is also consumed by mobile home park use more than anywhere in Florida. It's basically a city that is covered with mobile home parks that has some of the most beautiful beaches in the state. So we know for a fact that Bradenton is next in the eyes of these greedy developers. We can say that because in the area of Bradenton, Manatee County, you had the 9th fastest growing zip code in the United States in 2024, the 9th in the country, and the #1 fastest growing zip code in the state of Florida, an area of Parrish in Manatee County, the same county where Bradenton sits, was the fastest growing zip code by population growth in the United States last year. So we know that Manatee County is in the eyes of builders and developers because it has been in 2024 one of the fastest growing areas in the United States. With much of that growth happening in Parrish and Lakewood Ranch far inland, while the city core of Bradenton sits covered with mobile home parks. Mobile home parks that have a large percentage of undocumented residents. But we know that in 2025, that number may be reduced, and that will lead to these mobile home parks becoming vacant, rents dropping, and that will be a very good incentive for, once again, developers to see an opportunity to finally go in and knock down these mobile home parks, which means that the few remaining residents here are under threat of any type of corruption. And what's interesting is we talked about Sweetwater, Florida, but there's no other county in the state of Florida that has a worse reputation for corruption than Manatee, other than perhaps Bay County, Florida. Being one of the most corrupt counties in the state of Florida, it isn't a surprise that anything developers want to do in Bradenton, Florida, will be easily accessible to them with the reputation that this place has for corruption. Despite the fact the state of Florida prides itself in being a place of law and order, the state of Florida has never conducted a reverse sting on kickback operations to see exactly how far some of these public officials are willing to go if money's on the table. Perhaps if they did it, there wouldn't be anybody left in any of these local offices. Before moving to Bradenton, Florida, I lived in Naples, Florida for 20 years, right on the Lee Corridor line, right next to Bonita Springs, Florida. And I can tell you that what I saw happen in Bonita Springs, Florida is exactly what's coming to Bradenton itself. This decrepit, rundown marina in Bonita Springs, Florida, behind the old Kmart, used to be a rundown mobile home park full of mostly undocumented workers. Today, it is a beautiful luxury apartment complex. Looking back at what it was and what it is today, I can definitely say that I would rather have a new apartment complex here than a rundown trailer park. And it's noteworthy that it's set as a vacant lot for many years before developers actually started to build something here. But in the case of Miami, they're building high-rise skyscrapers. Here in Bonita Springs, they're low-level apartments. It's a much nicer form of urban development. That's not what's happening, let's say, in Miami, where they're just stacking it up into the sky. This isn't the only example of a mobile home park disappearing in Bonita Springs, Florida. Near downtown, there's currently an area that is a park that used to be a large mobile home park. And I can say without a doubt, it was beneficial for the city of Bonita Springs to get rid of these mobile home parks in the core of the city and replace them with public areas that now contribute to Bonita Springs being one of the most beautiful places in Florida. There simply wasn't room in the beautiful downtown of Bonita Springs for a rundown and decrepit mobile home park remnant of the 50s and 60s when the city had boomed and the downtown area needed to be used for public places. Surrounding the area where this mobile home park was, today are parks and beautiful areas, but to be exact, on the east side of Old 41, it's nothing more than an empty lot. This is where the mobile homes were. To this day, it is still nothing more than an empty lot. And this was many years ago. So the city of Bonita Springs knocked down these mobile homes, but they never went in and did anything with the land. It's kind of like a place where you can park your car or maybe use as a kayak launch. There simply wasn't any room right here in downtown Bonita Springs among all these city improvements and historical areas and parks as well for a rundown mobile home park remnant of decades past. It simply wasn't the image that Bonita Springs needed. But years or even decades later, it is still nothing more than an empty lot in downtown. And the spot that used to be a mobile home park behind the Kmart, that took years before they actually built something there. So it isn't uncommon for builders, developers, or landowners to sit on a piece of land for a very long time before actually developing it when the previous land use was mobile homes. Perhaps this is a way of diverting attention away from builders and developers to allow years, sometimes even decades, to unfold before going in and building something else. In the case of Sweetwater, Miami, they moved so fast that the intentions were clear and obvious. In the case of Bradenton Beach, Florida, when they were accused of trying to steal the land for builders and developers, they were quick to say that their intentions were actually for parks and city use. But that's not more than a diversion from the real issue, which is a land grab regardless. And keep in mind that when low-income areas get taken away and these areas become public parks and public areas, it contributes to the overall propagation of real estate appreciation within the adjacent area. So this still benefits builders and developers indirectly. And this is something else that many people in Florida overlook, that when you get rid of low-income areas and replace them with public areas, the adjacent real estate appreciates. That's exactly what's happened in Miami and in Naples, where development has had nowhere to go, and that has led to price appreciation. Just take a look at Naples, Florida, where they've turned the entire city into a furniture store parking lot in order to continue swallowing up real estate, driving up prices of whatever land is left. Naples, Florida has more protected coastline than any other city in Florida, and this has led to increased price appreciation because it has limited the amount of available coastal properties. And endemically, there's nothing exactly wrong about builders and city planners to seek this type of growth planning. The issue is that they weren't straightforward about it from the beginning. It was more of a last-minute diversion, and this is where you raise red flags. If their real intentions were to knock down the mobile home parks in Bradenton Beach to turn them into city parks, why couldn't they have just said that from the beginning? Why did they have to go through the whole entire process of being accused of cohesion with developers to then pull the cat out of the hat at the last minute to cover their names when their plans fell through? And this is the reality, that there must have been some other alternative intention, because if there wasn't an alternative intention, why would they have pulled that cat out of the hat at the last minute? Because it certainly wasn't a rabbit. If you've ever been on Palm Beach Boulevard towards downtown Fort Myers, you'll notice that on the north side there's a huge empty lot. That used to be a massive mobile home park, but today this area is sitting empty and vacant. And that's that empty field you see right before you get to downtown Fort Myers. Perhaps it was an eyesore of some sort for all the new skyscrapers going into downtown Fort Myers. But whatever the reason, it's still an empty lot today. This mobile home park also brought a lot of crime to the area. Now, I had a friend that used to live here, and I can't remember what he used to sell for a living, but I do remember it being somewhat of a crime-ridden area. So in the case of Lee County, Florida, these areas haven't been demolished with the immediate intention to create new development. Many times these places sit empty for years, sometimes even decades, before any type of rezoning efforts take place. Now back to Bradenton, Florida, the areas highlighted in red are areas with mobile home parks. You can see it takes up a huge percentage of the landscape of the city. Areas in purple are areas that are currently being redeveloped for new home construction. It's very clear that there isn't a lot of land available in Bradenton for development. Most of the green areas are actually protected, so you can assume that these areas in red, where there's mobile homes in the center of the city, are areas that eventually are going to become attractive to real estate developers. And hurricanes are the perfect opportunity to evict everybody out and try to rezone these areas without drawing too much attention. Now, this area hadn't got hit by hurricanes for hundreds of years, and the damages from wind to the mobile home parks in Bradenton was substantial, but it wasn't catastrophic, and it would really require a lot of destruction to be able to condemn these mobile home parks that are abundant in Bradenton, Florida. But like I said, with growth spreading far into Parish and Lakewood Ranch, it's not a surprise that builders and developers now have their eyes on all these mobile home parks in Bradenton, Florida. So if you're an elderly person who's thinking about moving to Florida, these are not good options. And if you currently reside in one of these elderly mobile home parks in Bradenton, Florida, you need to be aware that eventually, whether a catastrophic hurricane or just the intention of the landowners to sell this land, could eventually bring you to the poorhouse, forcing you out of your mobile home. In the case of having corrupt city officials, like what happened in Sweetwater, Florida, what they may pay you for your property may be an insignificant amount, barely even enough for you to vacate your property. I think people in Bradenton, Florida already got a taste of what their intentions are, because everybody in Bradenton saw what happened on Bradenton Beach and how they were keenly desiring to have these mobile homes completely condemned. Interestingly enough, the poor, more rundown mobile home parks that were completely destroyed further inland were nowhere on their radar because there's no malicious intent for this land yet. But eventually, if you do live in one of these places and you don't own the land, you need to be aware that the intention and the program is to eventually eradicate these mobile home parks. And like I said, living in Bonita Springs, Florida, I can definitely see that Bonita Springs, Florida is a far better place today than it was in the past when these mobile home parks were there. The land use in Bonita was reserved for city parks and for some nice apartment complexes. It took many years of these pieces of land sitting vacant before they were actually built. In other places like Miami, they're moving a lot quicker. They're just not afraid of public lashback. Many times, just by getting rid of these mobile home parks and letting them sit vacant, it creates a situation where real estate appreciation increases for the entire city because it isn't perceived as a complete giant trailer park wasteland, but people see empty green land and see potential. And this reduction in population density also contributes to price appreciation of existing real estate, something that may not be that much of a problem in Bradenton, Florida, but in places like Bonita Springs, close to Naples, that is definitely a notion to consider. Now, Bradenton isn't at that point yet, but eventually the options of affordable housing for the regular working class people to live in the state of Florida are thinner and thinner, and living in Florida requires more and more money, leaving less and less space available for the poor working class people. Those who are from here suffer the most because, after all, the money that's infused into the economy here comes from somewhere else, and that money doesn't trickle down to the local economy, leaving the people that are from here economically deprived in their own homeland. During periods of heavy real estate appreciation, we know for a fact is when there's more pressure for these types of changes to take place. When the economy is lagging, nobody thinks about condemning a mobile home park, which just highlights the real intentions and motives of the individuals and places where this is happening. What really upsets a lot of people is that it isn't done with transparency. They aren't really told the real motives and intentions. They take advantage of hurricanes. They take advantage of anything they can, any opportunity to seize these properties through cohesion, through corruption, but they never just straight up say, hey, we're going to redevelop this land, the city's going to buy it for a park, or, of course, we have a developer who wants to build some high-rise apartments. It's never done directly. It's never done properly. It's always done with some type of malice. In the case of Sweetwater, Florida, what they paid people for their homes, especially being in Miami-Dade County, was an absolute disgusting act. And this, in my personal opinion, everything we're talking about here is my personal opinion, is what really makes people angry. The fact that when these things happen, they don't even give people the decency of being straightforward about the reality. I think if more of these developers and situations were at least being faced honestly. We don't want mobile home parks here. We want parks. Hey, I'm your local commissioner and we want to get rid of poor people in our zip codes. We want to push you somewhere else. This is for rich people only. If they were just straightforward about the real intentions of what they're doing, but that's never the case. They always lie. They always mislead people. They always malignantly misinform the public about their intentions. And they always have some type of weird backup plan in case things don't go their way to say, well, we were just planning to put in a city park. We weren't really trying to help developers grab that land. If that was the intention, why didn't you say it from the get-go? It might take a hurricane or another circumstance for these people to try to deceive the public on why they're doing these changes, but I think everybody in Florida understands the reality that builders and developers want to take the land away from the poor, many times leaving people homeless in order for them to continue to inflate their balloon of real estate appreciation. Take a look at Grant Cardone. This individual, who's a massive real estate developer here in Florida, just happened to go on campaign with a particular politician who people think is intending to make real estate prices more affordable. Interestingly, this particular politician is a real estate Mongol. So keep in mind that people who are hoping for real estate appreciation to go down so they can afford housing are also voting for people whose entire investments are in the world of real estate. It's like for many of these people, it's like they're literally voting themselves out of housing because the only thing they hear is the George Wallace policies that these politicians push, and with their, well, I guess they're voting with their emotions and not with their housing needs. Interestingly, these are the same people who tell you that you need to hate particular groups of people because those are the people that are making your real estate unaffordable. It's really hard to feel sorry for people who literally dig their own graves when it comes to their economical situation. It's like being on a sinking boat and thinking that if you poke a hole, it'll let the water out. But I've been telling you guys for a while, the state of Florida with hurricanes, warm weather, and the fact that everybody wants to live in this state is not the type of place you want to end up in if you are poor. For years now, I've been telling people that they shouldn't move to Florida unless they are absolutely wealthy. For doing this, many people have criticized me and called me all types of horrible things, calling me a Florida hater, when all I was trying to do was prevent people from ending up in situations like this. They buy a mobile home, it gets destroyed by a hurricane, you can't insure it, you can't insure anything in Florida, let alone a mobile home. So now you are in this situation where everything you had is being stripped away from you. And there was one YouTuber who all along was trying to warn you that this wasn't a good idea. Many people never listened to me, and today they're finding themselves in these situations because they listened to other YouTubers, not the one who told them the truth. Sometimes the truth isn't pretty to hear, but sometimes you need to listen to some harsh words before you make a bad decision. To end today's video, I'm going to play you a clip from a video that I recorded something like a few years ago that reached over 100,000 people. Now this video got notoriety not because my advice was listened to, because so many people criticized my advice, but take a moment to hear some of the things that I told people about buying mobile homes. In a time when everybody was moving to Florida, I was telling people these mobile home parks are a really bad option. Listen to some of the things I said. I got so much backlash on this video that I even had to go back and blur out a few mobile homes because people said they lived there and they were trying to sue me, and what a complete cluster crap over a video that was intended to help people, but none of them took the advice. Let's listen to this video. Yo, what's up everybody? This is Jose from Florida Hood Blogs. Are you thinking about a mobile home in Florida? This video is so old, it was when my channel used to be called Florida Hood Blogs. So we're talking years and years ago when I warned people about this situation. It's an old video. Number one, and the most obvious reason why mobile homes are horrible investments, is the fact that you have to pay lot rent most of the time. That means you don't actually own the lot that the mobile home is on. Number two, it is a bad investment. Horrible investimento, my friend. Horrible investment. Let me explain to you why. Quite simply, a mobile home, an old mobile home like the one you're looking at right there, will never be worth more than the one right next to it, a brand new one. It would be exactly the same. Number three are buyers. The buyers just don't want to live in trailers. Back in the day, people used to buy trailers, mostly old people from Indiana. Number four, the banks will not finance mobile homes. Let's suppose that you do buy one. Now guys, I made this video like 5 years ago. This was like before COVID, before insurance in Florida really got bad. This was before all this crap unfolded. I was already warning people that all this crap was coming in the future instead of appreciating. So the banks don't finance mobile homes because they're bad investments. Número 5, storms. Yes, in Florida we have storms called hurricanes. Number 9 is the zoning. Mobile home zoning is horrible. And back then, insurance wasn't that big of a problem, but today, insurance is a huge problem, which means, buying a mobile home today would be absolutely a ridiculous decision. It was back then, but it's even a more ridiculous decision today. Who was the first YouTuber 5 years ago warning you about all these oncoming problems? So I made that video warning people not to do this. Look at this idiot. 3 years ago, he made a comment saying, I bought a mobile home in Lakeland, Florida, and my lot rent's only $300. Well, now, in that same area, lots in Florida keep increasing in Central Florida. So when I told them, hey, you shouldn't buy these places, they can jack up your lot rent, they called me an idiot. They all posted, I only paid $300 a month in Lakeland, Florida. This guy's an idiot. I mean, let's read some of these comments, right? I warned them that this was a bad idea, but they didn't listen to me. Mark Nolan, 3 years ago, says, this is all wrong. I bought a wonderful double wide in Lakeland for $27,000. My lot rent is only $511 a month with a clubhouse and a pool. My taxes are like $100 a year. I feel rich. This guy's an idiot. He doesn't know what I'm talking about. This is all wrong. May 9, 2024, rents for mobile home lots in Florida keep increasing. Some mobile home owners in Central Florida told that the amount of their lots have increased so much that it's pricing them out of their homes. Central Florida, that would mean Lakeland area where he moved to. I tried to warn these people that this was going to happen to them, but instead of listening, they had a slick comeback. Like, oh man, I feel like I'm rich. They went from, I feel like I'm rich to, I'm getting priced out now. But I warned them, they didn't listen.